I'll just start recording and then we'll figure it out. Okay, so I guess the question is, okay, so right now we have AI, right? We have generative AI with images, and then we have AI with chat. What's the kind of the next wave of AI, or what are ways that kind of AI can be used in marketing or crypto, or what kind of comes to your mind?
So yeah, the AI boom's definitely taken off, and we've seen the most prominent sectors being the chat and the picture creation, right? And those are great. However, the way I actually see this going in terms of both so that's great for content creation, and don't get me wrong, we're going to stick with that. In the music industry, we're going to see people using AI audio, so that's going to be something interesting there. Just wanted to put that side note out there. But when it actually comes to marketing, what's really going to be happening, AI analytics and AI-based targeting. So basically, at this point in the advertising industry, you're going to have AI effectively running your supply side platforms for you. And they're going to be filtering the targeting based on what works best for your content. So right now, if you're in paid marketing, you need to effectively be really good at target demographic selection, content creative, and the strategy rollout for socials. With the help of AI, we're going to see a lot of that kind of go to the wayside. The barrier to entry to get highly targeted quality ads is going to go down dramatically. So that's one thing. AI analytics, that's going to be crazy. Then, all right, let's talk about ChatGPT and what's going on.
Just on that too. So AI analytics, you bring up a super point, because you have I can't actually explain them, but I've talked to so many people that have reached out to me, being like, hey, do you have an ads guy, or do you have somebody that's a specialist in Facebook marketing and things like that? And oftentimes they're spending an enormous amount of time doing keywords, right? They're like, hey, I'm going to figure out the long tail keyword that has the highest cost per click, or a low cost per click, but provides this kind of very nice return. And I guess maybe it gets to the point where it's a lot of these agencies come under super pressure if Facebook comes out with a tool saying hey, skip your agency. We're going to use our pick the AI option or the agency option. Agency, you're going to talk to real people. AI option, it's tell us generally what your target demographic is, and we will start to A/B test ads all day using our AI, and it will basically always come out better than the agency.
Absolutely. So that's going to be a huge thing that puts agencies under fire. Wow. And then taking that outside of just paid media, but also agencies in talent management are going to be under fire, because creators are not going to have any incentive to sign with a talent agency to broker them deals. We saw that with the rollout of TikTok's Creator Studio, and Meta's now created their own version of such. And basically what you're going to see coming with the onboarding of service-based AI is all of a sudden the automation of brand connection and talent connection. So they're going to be serving the brands, the top influencers, for the niches they want. You're going to click 3 buttons saying, demographic, industry, category, and things like that. And then it's going to give you a list of the best people who fit the engagement rate you have. And it's going to be all AI powered. It's going to be, the artificial intelligence literally knows how to serve, hey, here's who has the highest engagement rate. Here's who's working in this industry. And here's how much it would cost to work with them. And then the whole process becomes automated. It's a 3-click model. And all of a sudden, where does the talent management fit in with that? There's no need to be giving anybody 20% of anything. And on the other side of that, so you want to get a little crazy, the next way.
Let's get crazy.
AI influencers. You don't so with the talent managers, okay, fuck the talent. You don't need the talent. We're going to make robot talent. So, you've already seen the puppeteering of images, right? So we have the ability to generate images. We have the ability to animate the images as if they look like real people and are talking and come to life. So all of a sudden, you don't need anybody to be the face of your brand. So UGC content just became automated. There's no need for all of a sudden these UGC creators who are getting paid, dramatically less than influencers already. If you're really good at talent management, what you're effectively going to do is run a virtual influencer farm. You're going to do the marketing yourself, scale the accounts, and then all of a sudden, instead of getting 20% of all the talent, you get 100% of the money. And you're just paying a salary to whoever's doing the puppeteering. And what's interesting there is it's already existed since like 2018, the whole virtual influencer trend, but it's hard to scale because the current state of virtual influencers are CGI-based virtual influencers. So as AI progresses and as we move from like the graphic that you referenced before from acquisition.com between GPT-3 and GPT-4, as we get to the point where the AI is competent enough to learn faster and feel more human than, almost hyper real. Like once we get to that point, then the cost and the barrier to entry to having your own virtual influencer is going to be dropped down dramatically. So all of a sudden, all these people who are like, oh, I want to be, a content creator. It's like, instead of the market just being saturated against every other person that wants to be a content creator, it's going to be saturated against robots that are run by marketers who are simply better at attention manufacturing and engagement farming. So there will be no incentive to work with talent that doesn't respond on time, talent that doesn't call back, talent that doesn't put out the right creative, and then all of a sudden, like the costs are going to go dramatically down, and it's the capital is going to be centralized to a couple of key agencies that are able to compete in that realm.
So this is all super interesting. So one question I had was, I guess you have the client that would say, hey, I need some talent to do something. You mentioned that kind of 3-click model where it's kind of just pick a couple, right? Like you have demographics, category, age, couple, pick whatever 3 you'd like. And then I guess with the generative AI, where you can kind of like generate it, I guess potentially even like something like ChatGPT, and that's kind of just the surface of this whole thing, but it can actually generate the scenes that would be required for the creative. So it's like ChatGPT comes in, creates the whole script and kind of like the lay of the land, and then you have this like generative AI for the imagery and the animation, and you basically kind of have this non-UGC. It's just fully kind of automated AI process to kind of create some sort of ad or things like that. That just seems totally amazing and totally wild too. And as you mentioned a couple of really interesting things about like you've worked with a lot of like very high brand name people, and obviously there's a full spectrum of kind of like the creative, and where some creatives show up on time all the time, but then a lot of creatives are kind of like, this is my world. They're playing the part of that kind of creative, or that actor is playing the specific part, and they are known to show up late.
10,000 followers thinks they're famous.
Yeah, exactly. So you have these famous people that kind of live this famous lifestyle and have famous mannerisms where they might not necessarily show up on time, or they might kind of think that they have a bit of a God complex. So with that, like you don't have any of those issues. And again, you kind of capture the full run rate, and maybe you pay a studio kind of like 20% or 15%, but you capture the 95% upside or whatever it is.
Absolutely. And then if you're a brand and you pay for that yourself, all of a sudden you have a face of your brand that you are in full control of and that you are not dependent on. I mean, like one great use case for this in like the podcasting space. I mean, let's look at Call Her Daddy. Like, they had a $70,000 to $80,000 yearly salary. They were nobodies. Barstool signed them, gave them $70,000 to $80,000. So then they blew up in less than 2 months. So all of a sudden you take that and, they're not putting out content because they're like, holy shit, with the audience we have and like the things that, like, the attention we've manufactured, like there's no incentive for us to be doing a salaried position. And they started shopping around the IP that they didn't even own anymore. So Barstool owned the Call Her Daddy IP, and they were shopping around the show because, they were the face of that entity. So they'd scaled it, they built it, that's great. But the only reason they got to that point was because they were signed with Barstool, and it was a Barstool co-signed entity. So all of a sudden, like let's say you're Barstool and you're in that situation, you're paying these girls, $70 to $80K each a year. So that's, that's $150,000 a year down the drain for them to not create content. And you do. Well, yeah. Here's the thing. You go to Descript, you put in the voice simulator, and you type in the script from ChatGPT, and all of a sudden, edit the intonations, and now you run the podcast without having the actual talent there at all. And it's using the likeness of their voice, sure, but they already own the rights to the IP. So that's a huge solution right there, done. And you
I love that idea.
Have talent trying to go and shop the deal for your own IP.
What about, an interesting question would be like, I love this idea of like automated, basically like the assets or automated talent. There's also an idea of, but like there's so many. This is actually this whole conversation kind of keep blossoming, keep going. But there's the idea of like an automated interviewer as well, right? Where it's like you just have this AI that kind of listens to the person and says like, okay, ask them another interesting question. Ask them another interesting question. Ask them another interesting question. And it kind of like keeps like maybe it can pull the kind of the all the online information about somebody and say like, okay, ask them like something that's a hard hitting question. And it's like, okay, well, just answer to the AI, and it's like a one-sided podcast with the AI on the other side.
And that's actually genius because, once you have that set up and the podcast host is effectively automated, like then anybody who wants to produce specific content around themselves and build their personal brand, that's an easy way to make sure that you're answering the questions about your business that make you look more credible and that make you more valuable to the listener. So all of a sudden you can be like, hey, here are the questions I want answered. You send them over. They have the AI ask you those questions. And, then you have your kind of pre-prepared delivery. And all of a sudden you run it through another AI and you're like, hey, chop this into 1 minute sound bites. It chops it into the sound bites. And all of a sudden you have an infinite content funnel. You have the reach of the podcast and you get to talk about what is valuable to you. And you're not at the risk of all of a sudden being asked something potentially controversial or adverse to your business. Because, like some podcasts, they're praiseworthy, right? But other ones, it's journalism, right? So people who are hard-hitting journalists, they go down this rabbit hole where they're like, all right, let's grill this person. Let's prove our credibility as a journalist. But then all of a sudden, like it's almost a verbal assault on the guest. So the idea of the AI-based host, that completely mitigates that problem. Done. You're getting to put out quality content at scale.
I love that. I love that. And I love the idea, like there's one thing I've seen in ChatGPT recently where it's kind of like you can allow, or a prompt that you can provide ChatGPT is to give it a persona type. So you can say, act as a doctor, act as a conservative journalist, act as a liberal journalist, or act as a highly paid actor, act as an NFT artist, etc. Right? And that could be a great, exactly as you're saying, it's like act as an interviewer that is very bullish on my company, right? And like wants to put me in its best light so I can have some demo reels to really kind of showcase our company, so that I can push that to TikTok or whatever platform is kind of trending at the time.
Yeah,
really cool.
That's so funny. So Chris, you'll love this. Basically, when I use ChatGPT and I'm using it for content creation, I will always add at the end in the voice of a 25-year-old marketer. And, just to kind of nail the tone, and then if I'm having it write stuff about me that's like being pushed out, I'll immediately add, make it praiseworthy.
It's so crazy. And it's so crazy, like just to know that little trick, right? Because that trick can change the whole tonality and the feeling of everything that it's creating. And like, it's like, well, and if you told somebody that's writing a ChatGPT prompt, they'd be like, oh, well, like the second they know that, then it's like, oh, obviously I would do that. But otherwise it's like, if you don't know it, it's like, I don't know, your ad copy could be totally different from somebody else's ad copy just because you 100%. Know those prompts.
And that's another thing that's going to be really interesting, right? So we've talked about how AI is potentially going to eliminate all these jobs of influencers, whatever. AI is also going to be creating a lot of these jobs because all of a sudden being a good communicator is going to hold a lot more value because anybody can access it. So it becomes a skill issue. So let's say you want to create good content versus create mid-tier content. Being able to be a successful prompt engineer will hold massive value. And that'll be a high-paying position because effectively, you don't just need to be able to write. A lot of people can write. You need to be able to edit. And that holds a lot of weight.
Yeah, definitely. And then I guess as AI, one thing that's always kind of been a little bit curious to me is that, like, do we start to go the route of like just like more dramatic content produced by humans, because the AI starts to cover like the kind of the natural boundaries of content creation. So then that pushes everyone to do like more and more extreme things, because the AI is creating so much good kind of average content all the time, and maybe it starts to push the boundaries of great content. Like, does that mean that you have to do crazier things all the time? Marketing stunts have to be even crazier all the time to get any awareness at all, because everything seems so sensational and perfect.
Yeah, so that's going to be one of those big things now is, we're going to see the rise. It's a polarization of skill, so, taste is going to matter a lot. We're going to see the rise of the curator economy because of this. And then in addition to that, and you see this a lot on platforms like TikTok, so I'm talking all about, how these brands can use all these virtual influencers and stuff. But one thing that we're seeing is the rise of authenticity. So there's going to be a huge burst. People want real. People want it to at least feel human. They want to be connected. So that's one of the main reasons they're using social media. There's two main uses of social media. It's to escape and to connect. And, for people who are looking to connect with other people, they want the content to be relatable. So if it's just, overly polished and it's all this good content, right? There's almost a category of like kind of bad content that's going to do well because it feels more human, and they're like, all right, like I connect with this person. I do stutter when I speak, or like I don't look at the camera, or, like it's low light, or, like stuff that's shot like, in bed, or stuff that's shot like, chilling on the couch or walking around. Like all of that is on the rise because people don't want overly polished, overly cheesy. They don't want it to feel fake. They don't want they don't want it to be curated to the point of inauthenticity.
Yeah, I really appreciate that insight, and it's almost, it seems like the second it's so polished, it feels like you're being sold to by a big company, versus exactly that word authenticity is kind of so key, right? Where it's like, I feel like I'm talking to another human. With another human, I can do great things, but if I'm just talking to an AI, that thing at the end of the day really has no response to me because it was generated by a computer, not somebody else. I love that.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting angle to the way that social media works is people want to connect with other people. So you tweeted out recently, I'm not trying to gamify a following. If you like my content, follow. And if not, that's okay. So I really like that tweet because it's like, it speaks to the humanity of social media. And that's one thing that's like, I think AI will initially push away from that. Like, as mentioned before, there's going to be the rise of the AI influencer, and there's going to be a lot of stuff around that. But there's also, I think it's going to push more people into being more human, for instance, taking it kind of out of AI and into NFTs, like everybody has an NFT profile picture these days. And I've been strongly advocating against that for like the last week, because it's like, it makes social media less social. So I'm like, all right, like, let's connect on a human level. Let's see each other's faces, So I think there's a lot of value to the whole concept of, all right, if you like what I have to say, great, and if you don't, great, because all of a sudden we're not trying to, play the algorithms and just trying to connect with people as people.
Yeah, like, and it's so interesting because it kind of gets to the point where, like, recently I've been seeing a lot of like, I don't know, and I'm sure everyone's been seeing it, but there's been more and more like threads online where it's like, here's like 5 books you have to read this year. Here's like 5 ads you should watch. Here's 5 this. Here's 10 of this. And it's like, at some point, it's like, you can't even keep up. It's like, for me to read 5 books, it's going to take me a month or a couple months. It's like, I have a full-time job. I'm working all the time. Like, I want to read all the time, but there's just a full life outside of that, right? And like, whatever the number of books, maybe it's 10, 20 books, depending on how fast you read. But it gets to the point where it's like, even if people have these like content schedules, every single day they come out with another 5 books you should be reading, another 10 quotes you must read, another 50 movies you should watch. It's like,
but
even the person that's posting it,
doesn't that feel less authentic? Because it's like, all right, there's no way you're reading fucking 5 books in a day. It's like, it's right? Like, get out of here with the bullshit, like everyone, because that's kind of a big thing. It's like it's almost painfully inauthentic, you know, because
Yeah.
you run at a little bit of a dichotomy, right? Especially if you're trying to be a business thought leader, because on the one hand, you want to be credible. On the other
Yeah.
hand, you want to be authentic, and you want
Yeah.
people to, you know, view you as both. You want to be a real person, but the most authentic thing is, you know, admitting that you don't know. And all of a sudden, like, that's probably the thing that hurts your credibility the most is, you know, to be on the journey, right? So it's like, let's take Gary Vee. He's like, all right, document, don't, you know, like, you know, don't lecture, right? So it's like, if you're trying to create content and you have nothing to say, just regurgitating what other people are saying, like, that just makes you seem like, you know, one, you're a tryhard, and two, it's like, how pretentious of you to like hop on the internet. Like, I mean, especially like, you know, let's take me. Like, I'm 25 years old. Like, all right, I go up there and I'm like, all right, like, this is how you live life. You know, this is like the best relationship advice. Like, this is the best, you know, like the best marketing advice you'll ever hear. Like, all right, like anybody who's like 40 plus is like, I've got 15 years more of experience in this.
Yeah.
Please shut up. Like, what do you know? What lived experience do you have to be giving the advice that you're giving today? So that's one of those pieces that's going to be extremely interesting because, you know, especially since AI can't think, you know, we're going to get into that age where, like, all right, the AI is able to articulate content phenomenally, but it can't synthesize anything new. So all of a sudden,
and to that point, like, it also can't live your life for you. So like, as you're saying, like, that kind of like document, don't create stuff. It's like, as long as you're putting it out what you're doing, it's like, okay, well, it does not matter if you had like a super day or bad day. You're just saying like, hey, I'm working on this. This went well. This didn't go well. And that's really kind of what it's all about. And then we just have this side repository, this side gold mine of AI, where it's like, anytime you want to go get like great content or like ask the AI to make like a new cocktail or a recipe or like a new travel destination, it's like the AI will tell you great places to go, but how you experience it is the secret sauce. It's like nothing can replace your experience, and kind of, I guess that is almost like just how you feel, but then it's also like there's this balance of like how you feel versus just like being like pragmatic and like kind of like, hey, this is how, even though I feel this way, it should work out this way. It's like, it's a very interesting way of kind of how it all plays out.
Yeah, totally. And like, that's why like storytelling is going to be on the rise. Like, you know, first person communication is going to be on the rise. Like, you know, we are all taught in school not to use I statements when we're writing, but that was probably the worst piece of advice they could ever give, because all the best stories, I mean, think about like, you know, Gonzo journalism. Like, you know, the best stories have the writer in the story. So like, you know, that's going to be a really big piece here is like, it's not about what you know, it's about what you learned. So
totally. And how you tell it.
Yeah, you want people to see the journey and be on the journey with you. Because if it's just like, hey, I'm this big hotshot, like, you know, I've done all this shit, like, you know, go look at my Lambo, and like, then all like, you know, you just put out a bunch of diatribes of like, you know, all right, like, here's what's wrong in this industry, here's what's wrong in that industry, and like, here's why you're not making enough money. It's like, dude, like, nobody knows why you're sharing that, and there's no reason to believe this person that's saying it, because they haven't communicated that they've done it before, and they haven't communicated the struggle, you know. And I think people like to watch, like, everybody loves a rags to riches story. So that's one of the pieces that's going to be really interesting. Is like, all right, like, you can't start at the top. You can't start with the A-level content and be like, oh yeah, like, I know everything, because it's like, all right, Nostradamus, settle down. Like, you know?
Totally. And yeah, I mean, I love it. And I love that we're kind of both on this journey, kind of building together. Maybe we wrap this call up here and we kind of continue to document as we go along.
Sure, yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, sounds good, man. We'll, you know, make it happen.
I love it. Okay, I'll talk to you soon.